Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to a brand new video. I noticed lately that a lot of people are doing this housing market crash and the expected crisis that they're comparing to 2008, and I wanted to really have an honest conversation with you about what's actually happening and what's going on and what we can expect in the future, because I see a lot of this type of content going out and I don't know why. Actually, no, I do know why. I think it's clickbait and it's probably just good for the algorithm and it's like fear mongering and it works. It gets people interested. But I think it's important that we have an honest conversation about what's actually happening because we're missing the plot here, right? Like, what's really good? We're not talking about what's actually important and what's actually going to happen. So let's dive into what's been going on, what we can expect, and is there actually a housing market crash? First things first is like let's get this out the way. The housing market is not going to crash. And yes, you know what? You may think, if you've been following my channel for a while, you may think I'm biased because not only am I a real estate investor, but I'm a licensed real estate agent as well. So you may think there's incentive there for me to say that it's not going to crash. However, what I will say is I've been investing for almost 10 years now. So I've kind of seen a decent amount of cycles and I have an idea. Now, granted, I wasn't around 2008, but I do know, based on how I buy properties, I think I have a well idea so far as the real estate economy and what's going on there and why I think it's not going to crash. I'm going to give you a few reasons. Number one, this is not 2008 and we have much better underwriting. If you don't know what underwriting is, it's basically like checks and balances when it comes to someone buying a house. So back then they had these ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets type of loans where you could just walk into a bank and say, hey, I want to buy this house, and you're going to state whatever you earn, whether it's true or not, and they're going to give you an approval saying that you can buy this house. We don't have that nowadays. And I can tell you that personally, when I'm buying a property, it's a lot of scrutiny, right? They're looking at all your bank statements, your W-2s, 1099s, they're looking at so much to validate that you can purchase this house. Nowadays, I remember before, if you were buying a house and you had to get a VOE, which is a verification of employment, they will call your job or get a letter, and that would be it. Then it became, they'll call your job and get a letter maybe a week before you close. And now in today, post 2020, what they do is they call your job or verify your employment the day of closing. So that's how tight things have gotten to make sure that people actually can afford the houses and that we don't repeat what happened in 2008. I don't see that happening. Number two is people that own homes, about 40% of people that own homes do not have a mortgage, meaning there's nothing to default on. 4 out of 10 people walking around that own homes have no mortgage expenses. Like, do you know how wild that is? That's an insane stat. Almost 50% of people do not have any bills when it comes to like a mortgage. And then about 60% of people that do have a mortgage, they have a rate less than 4%. Meaning it could be extremely affordable. So they either bought during the time of 2020, 2021, 2022, or they took the opportunity to refinance the home that they had to get a cheaper rate, which means they got a cheaper payment. There's some other reasons as well, but that says a lot as far as why it'll be a lot more difficult nowadays for the housing market to just crash compared to 2008. There's a lot more insulation here, and that's just on the buyer's end, right? There's a ton of people who own homes who have so much equity. Then there's also the fact that government's going to get involved and they don't want the same thing to happen. During 2020, when people, there's a period in 2020 where mom and pop owners who had like, not like large investments, but they had like single duplexes and triplexes and quads that they were rent out to tenants. And there's a period where tenants were not paying rent, understandably so, right? Either they lost their job, they were sick, or they just decided they didn't want to pay anymore because of the climate of everything going on and everyone being sick. So what did the owners do during that time, right? Think about it. Like, essentially that would lead to the collapse, right? But no, there was none. So the government stepped in, the bank stepped in, and they offered forbearance for homeowners, right? If you lost your job or your tenant's not paying, don't worry, put these payments on the back end. And what that says is they're doing everything in their power to keep this train going. It's not going to crash. There's too many things at play here to make it so it does not crash and that the system is upheld. They want the values to stay the way they are. They do not want to crash. It does not serve them for this market to decline, and they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that it doesn't. And right now, I do not see it. Even with the economy the way it is, think about it. There's so many layoffs. There's employment is high. AI is coming and taking people's job, automation, yet here we are, and technically the housing market is still much stable. The next thing is though, if it's not gonna crash, right, where are we going? What does the future of real estate look like? I am an advocate for home ownership. So once again, you may say I'm biased, but I fully believe that home ownership can change the trajectory of your life and the generations who are coming after you. There's so much value in owning a home, and I'm mainly a multifamily investor, so I think in 2, 3, 4 units, not necessarily a single family home. That's cool, but I'm talking about that, like an actual asset that, you know, provides you with income. Or I'm talking about something where even if you got like a duplex and you living in one unit and your kids living in another unit, if you have kids, like, there is value in that. So where do we go from here? Granted, the reason people talk about this housing market crashing its prices is because things are so expensive and they can't fathom the numbers still going up. Like, the money printer still being on, they can't figure out how can things get any worse, which is why I say that. However, I don't think that's what's going to happen. It won't be a crash. What will happen is more co-shared living spaces. There'll be more people living together, not necessarily family, maybe friends and strangers, than ever before, right? So we're going to have these co-shared living spaces where people share facilities such as the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, but they have their own separate bedroom areas, right? We're going to see more of that instead of people having their entire apartment to themselves. We're going to see smaller apartments. That way that the developers will still make their money because that's their goal, yet people could have their own apartment. So people won't have these massive bedrooms that could hold a king-size bed and a ton of furniture. We're not going to see that no more, especially in big cities. We're going to see people leaving the big cities to go to more affordable areas, specifically like the Midwest or those Sunbelt states. Like when you look at Texas and Arizona, those places, they did a lot of development, probably too much development. And because they did so much development in a lot of those areas, you see rent prices going down. In states like New York, specifically New York City, Charlotte, DC, on the East Coast, there's not much room for all this development, and the supply is pretty low, demand is high, which is why you see prices raising the way they do. However, in the other states, you're going to see the population increase when people realize that they just can't afford these other states, when they realize that they have the opportunity to work remotely and they don't necessarily need to be on site anyway, and they are willing to give up whatever community they have that is dwindling anyway because of the cost of living. I think that we're going to see more sustainable buildings, right? So more green buildings where it at least possibly alleviates some of the expenses that tenants do have, whether they pay their own electric bill, right, or heating. So you're going to see more conversions you're going to see less gas stoves and more electric stoves. And you're going to see more solar panels. And this should reduce some expenses, hopefully, to at least stabilize the rents or possibly reduce it. We're going to see more developments, more skyscrapers start to spread out throughout the country because they're going to start to go up to build more units so that they can solve this housing crisis. I think we're going to see everything else except a crash. We're going to see all of those things come into play. We're going to see more AI integrated with real estate, and I think this is the only concern that someone probably should have is the blend, the mesh of AI and real estate, because the same way that websites such as, like, let's say Kayak, or you go to book a flight, they use algorithms to determine the price, right? So the cheapest flights are usually based on the day where people are less likely to book. What if that same thing happens to real estate and rental prices? If they come up with algorithms, which right now they are doing, and they're calling it price fixing, but what if it becomes standard? And now rent prices fluctuate, not just like on a month-to-month, like on a daily, not even a year-to-year, on a daily, based on when people are looking for apartments, based on the weather outside, based on the employment rate for that city. Then that becomes dangerous, because then you have something to worry about so far as, okay, you'll never get ahead. You'll never be able to save because they're going to maximize how much money they can get out of you. That would be more of a concern than an actual housing market crash. Although it does seem very difficult right now as far as acquiring a home, I do still believe there are opportunities. I do still believe house hacking is a possibility for a lot of people. I do still believe that if you have, on-time payments, decent credit, that you can get into the game, and you just have to be strategic about it. And I do not believe that if you are waiting for a housing crash, it puts you in a better position. In fact, I think that waiting for a housing crash and waiting for for this market to go upside down is actually going to hurt you. I've been an agent for almost 10 years now, about the same time I've been investing. And I can't tell you how many buyers that I have been helping who decided that the market is too tough right now, all the way back to 2016. And they said, you know what? The housing market is about to crash. I'm not going to buy right now. I'll wait till it crashes and then I'll buy. And guess what? That was almost 10 years ago. And some of these people, well, I'll say 10 out of 10. Anyone who's ever said that to you, 10 out of 10, has not purchased a property. They still have not purchased a property. Why? Because the housing market has not crashed. Not only has it not crashed, things have become a lot more expensive. So they're officially priced out now, because yes, they were approved at a certain price point and a certain interest rate 8 years ago, but now they can't afford it because their wages, what they get paid yearly, has not increased enough to match what happened with the housing market. It hasn't matched the spike we got in 21 and 2022. So now they can't purchase the property at all. Now their only choice is to wait for a housing market crash if one ever happens. So I kind of urge you to not take that outlook, to just look at it a little bit differently, to see if you have the ability to, right? If you have the ability to, and you have the resources to look into purchasing a home ownership, if that's something that you want to do. But don't think that you are going to purchase if and when the housing market crashes. It's not to say that it can't never happen. It's just to say that it's not going to happen right now. At least not in the next 6 months, and possibly not even in the next year. In fact, I think in the next year, if things continue the way they are, especially with the feds, what this current administration wants to do, I think housing will get even more expensive. I think it'll be even harder than it is right now. So I suggest that if it is something that you want to do, check out for some home buyer programs. Try to see what it would look like if you were to purchase a house today versus waiting for the clock to strike 12 on February 37th and there's a housing market crash, what allows you to buy and not face all the competition of all the other people who want to buy if that happens as well. So I hope this helps, and if you have any questions, let me know. If you think otherwise, let me know. I'm curious to hear your point of view as well. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.